You ready, Alfonso?
Hey YouTube! Accomplished the impossible here today with some information that I have learned over the last couple of weeks that have been extremely beneficial, and I wanted to explain this information and explain the things I have learned to somebody that may be watching this that has a question on what radio they should buy for what application. We're going to be coming at this from a hobbyist standpoint, not commercial or fire or police or anything like that. This is strictly just enthusiast side, what you would want to
Today, Junior?
probably look for. So the first things first, when you hear the term radio, a lot of people associate that with ham radio.
The 2-week-old unrefrigerated pie. Long ways to drive.
Or amateur radio, or GMRS. GMRS, ham radio, as you all know, is not scanning. It is actually talking on the radio on FCC approved bands. And the other term that comes to mind is scanning. So scanning is a whole different world. You can't just take most of the time you can't just take a store-bought Bofang, throw that on a trunking system and have it work. So we're going to go over some of the higher end radios that are accessible online, and we'll talk about the price differences and what I personally prefer to use as a daily driver for different purposes. So we will start off with one of my most reviewed radios on the YouTube channel, which is my Harris XG100. The Harris XG100 has a lot of advantages, as I've said in the past. It has, it's an all-band VHF UHF 7800. It is a Harris radio, so it's built very well for the most part. It's relatively rugged. Somewhat ergonomical. I would say that this radio is lacking in size and just appeal. This radio is very heavy and it's just a really bulky radio. So, but where this one really shines is the price. You can get this one from anywhere from $300 to $500. If you want to get a really good one that's in shape, this one will probably run you about $800 to $900 out the door. If you can get programming software for this radio, I would recommend this radio all day long for the average Joe that wants to transmit on amateur radio or GMRS, or wants to scan local municipalities like a fire or anything. The reason I say that is because, coming from a scanning aspect, this radio is phenomenal at scanning. The audio quality is not bad. Could be a little better, but it's not bad. But the scanning, the way to program scanning on this is just super simple compared to other lineups like the Kenwood or the APX radio. You don't need to do dummy channels. You don't need to program anything special. You don't need to know how to program scan list or anything like that. You just need to check a box that says do not affiliate. And that's it. Then you're done. You're home free. Check that box says do not affiliate, and check the box that it prevents you from transmitting on a talk group. You're home free. It can't be any more simple on the software. There's a couple of other videos out there that recommend or that show you how to program an XG100 for scanning. And it's an easy video, it works. That's how I learned how to program these for non-affiliate scan originally. And they're just really good radios for scanning. And the only downside to these is they are just heavy. Really heavy radios, and the thing is huge. So here is a tape measure for comparison. Pretty big radio. So the other options out there is a very, very iconic option, which is the APX lineup of radios. These APXs are, there's a whole lot of issues buying these radios. As far as me recommending average Joe radios to play around with, I honestly wouldn't 100% recommend an APX. It is very easy to get the software for an APX radio. It's free online with a Motorola account. Anybody with a Motorola account can download APX software, program their radios, and update their radios. But the issue with these guys is they are so difficult to acquire. Not as far as the availability. They're all over the internet. But I'm a big believer in if you're going to buy a radio, you need to be able to know where it came from. And this is where the APX lineup is not the best radio to get for a user that is just playing with this radio on a daily basis and not using it as a fire radio or a police radio. Again, this is just specifically talking as a hobbyist or enthusiast. The reason I say that, a lot of the radios on eBay have what's called no tags, okay? No tags is a trigger word for me. I don't like, and I probably won't ever buy a radio that doesn't have tags. The reason I say that is if it doesn't have tags, you can't guarantee the authenticity of where it came from. Most of the radios that do not have tags on eBay are Frankenstein of different parts. People will acquire parts through less than legal means. Something fell off the truck at the shop. Something was a counterfeit part that was made. I just can't buy a radio knowing that. It just really, really bugs me. Don't buy a radio. My rule of thumb is if you can't vet where it came from, it's not worth your money or your time. Which is really a shame because there's a lot of great radios out there that are look really, really good in shape, and I'm sure they work fine, but these APXs are really expensive. And I personally feel like if you're going to spend over $1,000 on a radio, that radio you should know where it came from, and there should be nothing fishy about it. So, what I say is, the issue is, people will get these radios, they will rebuild them with different parts, swap out boards, swap out parts, they will not format it with the right software. You're left with a questionable radio that just, don't ever, ever, ever rely on a radio that doesn't have tags in a life and death situation. For that matter, that's where I will tell everybody that APX is the way to go. If you are a municipality or a commercial vendor or an application where it's life and death, the APX is a phenomenal lineup. I think it's phenomenal. And I would highly recommend APX all day long for municipal agencies, and if you have an account and you have a radio administrator that is overseeing the radio management, let them do all the hard work, grab your radio, and get on that fire apparatus or police utility vehicle and go to work. I think Harris, however, is not your best go-to when it comes to commercial applications. The reason I say that is the XG100 has a lot of problems. Luckily, these radios are phased out. They are no longer used. These are gone. These are EOL. End of life. Several of the problems I have been told about is the interface completely freezes. this will freeze completely. You can't transmit, you can't receive, you can't change the channel, you can't do anything until you physically turn it off and back on again. For me, if that was a problem, that's a no-go. That is an absolute no-go as far as it being used on the fire ground or in an issue where it's life and death. Don't trust it, throw it away. If it does that once, that's it. I've seen the radios do that, so don't play with them. If that's the case, get rid of them, get some new radios. But I personally have not yet seen that happen on my radio that I bought. If it freezes, it's simple. Turn it off, turn it back on again, and then I can continue my scanning, or I can talk on repeaters or whatever. It's not a big deal to me, but as far as an agency goes, that is a huge deal. Don't do that. That's bad. So, but like I said, these are end of life, which makes them relatively cheap, and they're great little radios. If you are just looking for a radio where scanning's not a big deal to you and transmitting, you're just going to transmit and receive P25 or analog systems, the APX is kind of an overkill radio in my opinion. It's a really, really nice radio. They make different variants. This is the non-XE version where it's just, this is the 6000 only. So this is a monoband radio. I got this one for about $450 on eBay. Came with tags, and it has not been messed with or tampered with. The reason I say that, the serial number, the flash code, all of that is still on here, and the flash port matches the CPS software. And as you can see, it's old, used, and worn. I like that because that tells me that this radio was on somebody's belt being used, and then it was a part of an auction, probably got auctioned off. I can search the serial number on Motorola and see what the life of the radio was, who bought it, who used it, where it was used, and everything matches on the tag to its original operation. So it's a good little radio. For $400, I wanted to buy an experimental APX that I could take apart and not feel bad about, but at the same time, this radio is just so beautiful and works really well for what I use it for. I might just leave it. I kind of like the way it is. It's super slim. So if you're looking for an analog two-way radio that does P25, and you're kind of one of those guys that loves to have the next best commercial things, I'm not going to say don't buy an APX radio. I just think for your buck, for your bang on the buck there, you could get this and do everything this does. So, and this is just the 6000 monoband. So these guys, 6000 monoband averages from anywhere from $400 to $800. You can find the XE versions for $1,000. Then you have the XE versions. They're just a little bit more beefy, more rugged looking, and they go for anywhere from, I don't know, $1,700 to $2,000. So that is just another thing you gotta ask yourself if you see yourself wanting a commercial radio. I got these on some really good deals that I couldn't pass up, so I didn't necessarily have a desire for an APX radio per se, but I figured if I was gonna play around with something and get my experience back in it, because this is what I used to use quite a bit, it would be nice to get one again to mess around with and experiment with, and so I pulled the trigger. And I really like the APX lineup, just not for scanning. These things are a pain in the butt to program as scanning radios, and on top of that you have to have a system key to do it. Those can be a little problematic, and it's just not my go-to for scanning. Very difficult to program for a non-affiliate scan. There's a whole lot of hoops you have to jump through to make the software do it. Rule of thumb is just don't do it on an APX. You don't want to run into the risk of endangering an agency and trying to affiliate on a talk group and keying up on it when it's being used by another department on a call. So I would say stay away from the APX if you want to do non-affiliate scan. If you don't really care about non-affiliate scan and you want a commercial, beefy radio that's Motorola, the next best thing, sure, go with an APX version. Just know you're going to pay for it. But I think as far as my overall daily driver, it's probably going to be this guy. This is not an all band. This is the 7000 XE. This is UHF R1 7800, and again, this is the monoband 7800 only. But this guy, for the price of $400, $500, is VHF UHF 7800. Also does phase 1, phase 2, and it's just a great little radio for running around, scanning things, and talking on. Can't go wrong. So, I wanted to get this video out there because this was a good little learning point for something I wanted to get across. A lot of different things involved with these radios, but I'm always trying to tell people what the best radio is, the best bang for their buck. Obviously, the hardest part is the software, but if you can get the software, I love these radios for what they do, and it's not a big deal. So, hope that helps somebody. Figured that'd be informational. So, we'll talk to y'all later. Y'all have a good New Year's. This is Accomplish the Impossible out.